In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful Podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. In the space between stimulus and response lies our power to choose, and in that choice lies our growth and freedom. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving into 3 transformative themes: harnessing simplicity for fulfillment, transforming habits into purposeful actions, and embracing friction as a compass for growth. Our guest today is Daniel Lucas, a corporate leader turned wellness innovator and founder of Sprouts. Daniel's journey of turning personal struggle into a mission to make healthy living accessible offers invaluable insights. From leveraging simplicity to creating life-changing habits, Daniel's wisdom resonates deeply for anyone seeking a purposeful and health-centered life. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Mr. Daniel Lucas, welcome on Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
Sam, I'm wonderful. It's great to be here.
It's fantastic to have you. It's actually my first time meeting you, and what you're doing in the wellness is so inspiring to me. So I'm very glad to have you here. To kick us off, tell us more about Sprouts.
Yeah, the idea with Sprout was very simple. I found that there was a lot of research being released on broccoli sprouts being super nutritional. And the traditional way of growing them was a mason jar. And I found it very frustrating, and so did most people. And I decided during lockdown to draft a few ideas about how could this be done in a way that's a little bit easier. And so I was personally frustrated. I had quit sprouting. I'd tried it once or twice and was just like, this is a waste of time. And Sprout was, if you want to know what we're trying to accomplish, is to make wellness more accessible. And the idea there is we take the most nutrient-dense food, which is broccoli sprouts. There's tons and tons of studies about the benefits of these things. But what you don't see is how do you actually grow them? Why don't you see them in stores? And so I attempted to solve that and came up with a new design. I think we went through like 13 prototypes. And the idea there was that to make it so damn easy for you to grow sprouts that it's easier than a microwavable meal. It's that easy. So, and it also creates so many sprouts that you can eat them every day and not run out, because it grows. You harvest this every 4-ish days, and it grows about 6 or 7 servings at least of sprouts. So the idea there was I wanted to make a dent in the world with health, which was my passion. I was a longtime corporate employee that had nothing to do with health with my corporate life. And this was the first time that I really drew the line in the sand and said, I'm going to do this thing and pursue my passion and make a difference in the world for what I feel called to do, which is to make the world, give the world something that allows them to be healthy. And that's my passion is helping people get healthier.
No, that's beautiful. And I love what Plato had to say on this, which is necessity is the mother of invention. When you're thinking back, when you're bringing yourself back to basically that pandemic, the world is shut down, obviously a virus that kills many people. How is that basically that time, that big kind of like that pause in the world pausing because of that virus gave you perhaps not only the time, but also the inspirations to bring something like this forward?
I'm glad you asked that, Sam. There was multiple factors. One was that I started thinking about all these people in New York, and for example, here in Tennessee, the farmers markets were closed and the grocery stores were pretty barren. And I started thinking, how are people getting micronutrients in their diet? Because protein's pretty easy to freeze, put in a can, things like that. But micronutrients is not easy. And that's where I started thinking, if I lived in a crowded city and I had access to a really good way of making sprouts on my countertop, I wouldn't have nearly as much to worry about in terms of just hitting all my macros and micros for the day so that I feel good, I can think clearly, and I'm not worried about making it to the store or the farmer's market to get those things. So it was part of seeing supply and demand, seeing what happens when the supply chain is interrupted, and it's to help people to take control of their own nutrition. If you look at any health guru who is not selling snake oil, they're mostly going to tell you it's your responsibility to take control of your health, and the way to do that is to make it so easy to get the things that nourish your health and make it very difficult to get the things that don't. And I'll give you a quick example. If you're trying to get healthy, don't bring sweets into the house. And that way, when you decide after your meal, oh man, I could eat something sweet, the only thing you have are like apples, pears, and bananas that are on hand. That's a very simple tactic of making success convenient. And in this case, I'm trying to do the thing with making wellness more convenient, which is something people traditionally say is it's just so hard to get my veggies and I forgot to go to the market and I don't know what to add them to. So I probably put at least as much work into telling people like recipe videos and how to mix it with their foods as I do anything else.
Mm-hmm. That's what a lot of what James Clear was saying in Atomic Habits as well. This understanding
huge fan of James Clear.
Yeah, me as well. Me as well. It's such an incredible gentleman, and that's so interesting because for me, my desserts are mango chunks, frozen, or an apple. One of the two are definitely my favorites. And what you're saying to keep the sweets out and try to have as little of a temptation to go that route is definitely the case for anything, basically, in life, let alone wellness, which is, we know how important that is. Now, one thing I want you to enlighten me on, because you talked at this at length, and I'd love to, if you can do such thing here, is just how powerful the nutritional, basically, power of sprouts, because it seems to be a complete game changer for wellness, but I hear very few people talk about it. So please explain just how big of a deal this is.
So Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who is a health influencer, and she's one of those that's right up there with Huberman and Peter Attia in terms of people who use science to make their decision, not emotion. She did a few videos on broccoli sprouts and specifically the benefits of what's called sulforaphane. And sulforaphane is this super antioxidant, and broccoli sprouts is if there's a better way of getting it, I've not heard of it, but broccoli sprouts is this major powerhouse of sulforaphane. Well, the way that you get sulforaphane is when you have broccoli sprouts, they come in the form, it has what's called glucoraphanin in it. And as you chew it, it releases into sulforaphane in your body. So the antioxidants and the anti-inflammatory benefits come from that in the broccoli sprouts. If you're looking at sprouts from a strictly macro perspective and just saying how much fiber, how much protein, it's not that much more impressive than a good quality vegetable. But it's what you're not seeing in those macro profiles, and this is why a lot of people skip over it. They're just, I'm just on a low carb diet or I'm on a vegetarian diet. What you're missing is all the micronutrients that come in from that and how they heal the body. The stuff that sulforaphane does the body just blows my mind. I'll give you an example of a study that was on examine.com about 2 months ago. And it had 700, they took 31 studies and combined them. And there's only two groups in this study. There's a high broccoli group and a low broccoli group. So it's not terribly complicated. And what they found was people who on average ate broccoli 1 or more times per week, that's the high broccoli group. If they were in that group, over time, they were 35% less likely to develop any type of cancer. And there was a long list of cancers that some it was more effective, some of it was less effective. But generally, the rule of thumb was you're a little over a third less likely to develop cancer if you're eating broccoli at least once per week. Now, when you look at broccoli, There's a reason why all the bodybuilders out there eat chicken breast, broccoli, and sweet potato. That's your three staples. The bodybuilders got it right, which was they're basically hitting their macro and micros with those three staples. And so in this case, when you have broccoli sprouts versus broccoli, you're getting the steroid version or the stem cell version of broccoli. It is extreme. You're getting broccoli at its most potent form. And it's also, it's ripe. As soon as you make it in the sprout spout and you take it out, you need to consume it within about a week to get the major health benefits. Also, you don't cook sprouts. That's another thing. When you make broccoli sprouts, don't heat them past 150 Fahrenheit or it starts to kill that sulforaphane in there.
Interesting. So there's a bunch of very insightful tips here. And to me, one thing that was very interesting about your background is, again, like you said in your intro, you come from a corporate background. So for you, basically to basically go into entrepreneurships, and especially in health innovations, which we know obviously is a market that it's a huge market, but it's a very competitive market. What type of lesson did you learn in your principles of wanting to bring this product forward? Tell me more about some of the challenges and maybe some of the triumphs that you were able to accomplish.
So let me make sure I understand the question. Your question is, what did I take from my corporate background into this venture? Okay. So I'm going to tell you it's a two-sided coin, and you're talking to someone who has been in middle management corporate their entire life. So I'm going to tell you the pros and the cons of that when you start an entrepreneurial venture. The pros are that if you are in middle management in corporate and you are a reasonably diligent person, you learn systems. You learn this is the way a system works. This comes into here. We make that as efficient. I was in Six Sigma. I was in process design, and I was always in IT. So I knew technology, and I also knew the teamwork. I always understood the value of teamwork, and I understood the importance of systems and reliability. Corporate hammered that into my head to a point that I could show up to work with my hands tied behind my back and still basically be able to perform fine in a corporate environment. What happened when I went to entrepreneurship about 4 or 5 months ago was that having that background of systems is great. I basically focused on that. What it did not give me, and what I have had to completely build my new mind and muscles. I mean, it's almost like a stroke victim where you have to relearn how to speak and relearn how to walk. What I had to completely relearn was this. I'd say for me, the biggest problem with being an entrepreneur is suddenly nobody's telling me what to do anymore. And that everybody hears that and they go, oh, that'd be perfect. And it's so great. It takes a lot more discipline to get out of bed early in the morning with nobody waiting on you, nobody expecting you. And the only thing that you've got to do is basically what you want to do that day. And so when I say it's harder for me, I'm a very physically, I've always been pretty disciplined person. I'm a hard trainer. I was an ultra marathoner for years. I was a triathlete, all those things. So the discipline was there, but I was just kept waiting for someone to tell me how to do this. And I mean, I'm obviously doing this at a meta level when I explain this to you. It's not like I woke up and thought that. So it had to be the kind of thing where I was like, stop waiting for this to happen. You know, another thing I'd said in my entire corporate life is I'm not a salesperson. I'm not a salesperson. I don't sell things. Well, that had to change. I had to basically become every single time I go to a meeting. I was at the founders meeting yesterday for our local community. I was in there and I was shaking hands and like, this is what I do. This is what my product does. If you think you can help me grow or I can help you grow, let's talk. That is not how I operated in my corporate background. I was just basically like, this is what my job is and this is where it ends. So my passion has grown exponentially for what I do. The value that I get out of helping others is 10 times what it was when I was in my corporate background. What has become more difficult is, as you know, when you're growing your own business, cash flow is tight. I'm financing everything. There's the idea of being able to take, excursions or buy the things that I did when I was in corporate, that all that goes on the back burner too. I'm focused on my purpose, and all I need is just the basics to get by, and I have to make this business thrive. So the business thriving takes priority over the other stuff.
Yes. And you mentioned something that is so important, that's a paradox of, hey, I would much better prefer a life where nobody is basically telling me what to do. Well, I promise that most of you listening right now, and our audience are mainly entrepreneurs, so they can definitely relate to this message. But if in any studies of basically of biology, we understand that that's actually a very small percentage of the world, about 3% of the world that are born with brain structure that allows them to basically be able to be their own boss, as the cliche says, because the truth is, when you have a structure that is provided to you in the corporate world, where yes, you have somebody telling you what to do, but you're clear on what it is, you're clear on the outcomes and so on. For most people, that's not only way easier to rationalize, but also make sense of and act basically and operate within. Now, you tackle something that is also very, very key, which is you are a dedicated athlete, which was something that I love to read about yourself. You were obviously an endurance athlete. Tell me more about how you fall in love with that sport and perhaps how that propels you to build that discipline that is so important.
I was not in good shape. I did not take particularly great care of myself. My career was everything to me. And by the time I went to night school for 7 years while I was working at least 40 or 50 hours a week. And that included summers, so that by the time I wrapped that up around the age of 32, my son was being born, and I realized my health was out of whack. I was drinking 2 pots of coffee a day just to kind of keep up with the grind. And the whole thing was, Sam, I just kept telling myself, I'm doing this for my family. I'm doing this for my family.
Yes.
And
how long ago was that, by the way, that situation of you at that poor health state?
That was about poor health was probably 18 years ago. I started turning it around, and at 16 years ago, I drew a clear line and was like, I'm not going back ever. Once I'd had a little bit of taste of like starting to take care of myself and not getting by on 5 hours of sleep and exercising daily, I was probably, I want to say 32 years old, right in there, when I started really drawing the line. And I mean, I was a recreational athlete at that time. I was running like 10Ks and half marathons, and I mean, nothing extreme. And I remember specifically, I was in so much pain when I was doing the night school stuff that it was perfectly common. And I mean, at least 4 or 5 days a week, where I was popping at least 2 ibuprofens a day just to kind of get through the day because of back pain. And again, probably about 1.5 pots, 2 pots of coffee a day. I remember specifically having coffee in my 7:30, 8 o'clock evening classes. And I was so tired all the time that by the time I got home at 9:30, it was nothing for me to crash at 10:30 and sleep through the night and then get up again at 5 a.m. and go back at it. These days, I'm obviously not that young anymore, and I'm really glad that I had to kind of take control of my nutrition. But it's really just a decision, Sam, and that is it worth it? Is it worth it to put in the work? And for me, one of the major examples of that I live by each day is I do every single morning when I get up, with very few exceptions. I might miss it once a month, but I get up and I do about 10 to 15 minutes of mobility work. And it's become so ingrained into my morning behavior and the reason is because for the last several years I've been doing this, I've not had back pain. And when I get up, it's a very simple decision. If you don't do this, it may not happen tomorrow, but you're going to it'll start getting stiff again. When I go on vacation and kind of fall out of routine I can feel it. And I go, I got to take care of it. So I look at that pain as a burn, a stamp, a branding on my arm that says, what keeps you from going back here is the work that you put in here. And so with that mobility work, for example, yeah, it's boring. It's not any type of sexy Instagram workout or anything like that. It's not easy workout, but it's the kind of thing where it's to basically keep me from going back into back pain and things like that. And so from there, I think when my son was born, he just turned 16 a few weeks ago. That was when I started. That was when I really started saying, as a father, I've got to set the example here and start training and taking care of myself. And I was also watching my dad fall into the exact opposite group around that time. So I started looking at my dad and going, he's not been taking care of himself, and it's definitely caught up with him. I don't want to do that to my son. And so I started with what you would consider recreational races, 10Ks, things like that. I got into triathlon, and most people, I don't know why most people get into triathlon, but I can tell you, for me, it was facing my fear. I did not enjoy swimming at all. I hated the bike. I could run okay, just because I did a lot of little road races. So for the first 2 years I was doing triathlon, it was really just getting comfortable with doing this longer swims, doing the longer rides. And oddly enough, right as I finished, when I was wrapping up my last year in triathlon, it was the first time I was very comfortable on all three. I could easily swim a few miles. I could easily bike hours at a time, and I could also easily run for several hours without any major tribulations at that point. But I had found trail running, and the reason I fell in love with trail running immediately, because it was, number one, being in nature is a lot different than running on a treadmill or swimming laps in a pool. I love being surrounded in nature for my mental health, for my physical health. So when I first started trail running, I noticed afterwards, I was like, that's a lot more than a regular workout. It's a mental break from the world. It allows me to think clearly. I can process my stress. I can think about my problems. I came up with a phrase years ago, because I still hit the gym. Even now, I still hit the gym 3 days a week, even with all the other stuff. I go to the gym to blow stress. I go to the trail to get answers. So when I get back to my car after a long run, I generally have more clarity to take on life's deeper questions. When I go to the gym, it's more just like, I need to kind of blow some steam and get through this, and I'll be a better person when I walk out of here. So when I found trails, that sort of peaceful therapy was one part of it. The other part was when I found the ultra distances, which were considered anything longer than a marathon. I started running like the 50 milers, the 100 milers. I realized, this is I have very few superpowers. One of which is I have a very hard time quitting something. Once I start something, I have a very hard time quitting. And I noticed that when I was going into ultras, that superpower really started to pay off after like 8 hours of running, where people would start to basically be like, this is suffering, I'm out. I would be the kind of person who was like, there's no way out. And it would never even cross my mind to throw in the towel on an ultra because I didn't feel great or things like that. Fortunately, there was only one time I did drop, and it was in a 120-mile race, and I got hypothermia, and that was a humbling lesson. I was very arrogant in that I had put on my gear at a certain point, and I never my warm gear, and I never made it to that point.
Yes, and so basically, 16 years ago, you start to, and that coincides with the birth of your son as well, which I think is very powerful. Tell me more about, you mentioned about how important it was as a father, which that holds very deep meaning. Tell me more about how that makes you involved in your personal health journey.
Yeah, it's a really easy question, because one of my hobbies when I was younger was video games, and I remember the entire time I was in school for 7 years in night school, I refused to play video games because I said, I love them and they take so much time. But as soon as I'm done with this, I'm getting like the latest Xbox and PlayStation, and I'm getting an HD TV, and I'm going to finally enjoy myself because I have been starving for 7 years to just indulge. And as soon as my son was born, this was the time where I had just finished up the degree. I remember thinking about, where is the time going to come from? I remember where I was sitting, And I said, where is the time going to come from for me to enjoy these video games? Because I just found this new thing where I'm training. And I also have this young boy that I can spend time with and take care of. So where is the time going to come from for me to indulge? And it became very clear to me. It was like, okay, snip out the thing that is used to bring you pleasure and focus on the things that bring you fulfillment. So I traded short-term pleasures for fulfillment because I wanted to basically be the role model. And that was a direct conflict, kind of like going back to James Clear. Don't do a workout and then reward yourself with ice cream. That's the stupidest thing. When I see so many people go, oh, I went to this class today, so I went out for a cupcake afterwards. I go, okay, that is a complete conflict of the character that you're trying to become. And they go, well, I did this workout. I burnt 300 calories, so why can't I have my big cookie? Well, you can. But the problem is that you begin to associate exercise as a penance and a punishment in order for you to indulge. And ergo, it becomes a problem because anytime you look at exercise, you resent it because it's like, I have to do this in order to get that treat. So reassociating reward is a huge part of sustainability.
Yes, absolutely. And this mental framework of understanding that actually I want to be disciplined. The person that I want to be and want to become, this is one thing that I ought to be able to accomplish. Is such a powerful mental shift, which I think a lot of people struggle with. And I think I will go as far as it's a critical shift. For anything to occur, you need to understand not only its value, but the value in which you put in the actions to accomplish such feats. When you're thinking about, because this is a very interesting timeline, Scott, your son is born, your priority change, your understanding of your responsibility as a dad push you to be somebody of a perhaps a more meaningful depth when it comes to consciousness and love and so on. How does that concur with your intentions of you becoming a wellness advocate? Is that many years afterwards, or how does that coincide with that format?
Sam, it's I mentioned the example earlier about branding on my arm, the difference between being in back pain and not. I look at those years and I go, I see a lot of people who are struggling to make the switch over, and I remember how tired I was and how fatigued I was. And, it's one of those things that I use that as my sort of like testimony of, I want to help people experience life on this side of that equation. And going back to what you were saying earlier, people don't, for the most part, people know what to do to be healthy. I mean, they know I'm not supposed to eat this. I know I'm supposed to go to where they sort of miss the boat is they think that in their brain, the switch happens overnight. Well, starting on New Year's, I'm going to do this. Well, the problem is so I'll give you an example. One of my children has a big sweet tooth. And so if it's not sweet, generally it has to be food she already wanted. And I was explaining her the other day, because I ate a can, like one of my lunches for probably 15 years was a can of sardines on top of salad and And of course, if you ever tell people in general, hey, sardines is like one of the healthiest things you can eat, they'll cringe. They'll say, oh, sardines. Oh, I can't imagine. At least in America, people just look at you like you're crazy. But what they don't know is that if you eat sardines regularly, you begin to crave them, and then it becomes this thing where you're like, man, I cannot. If you go 2 or 3 days without them, you start thinking, man, I'd love to have some sardines on a salad, just with some truffle salt and pepper and a fried egg or whatever. The point there is, Sam, that you can develop the desire for the things that better you, but stop expecting it to just somehow click overnight. I mean, me talking about the entrepreneur journey, it's not like I woke up the next day after I'm no longer a corporate employee and was like, now I'm a natural salesperson. It does not happen overnight. You've got to put in the reps. The reps is the part that's underrated because at least here in America, everyone wants, results in a week. We all want it to be closed and done in a week. I mean, so this is one of those things where if you can right size the dose and be patient enough, it will occur naturally in sustainability. I mean, I know that's a word we keep coming back to, but I'm not talking about the environment. I'm talking about things that actually stand the test of time without relying, and this is the big fault. Do not rely on willpower for success. If you're relying on willpower for success and that's your theory of what's going to carry you, it's a very fleeting thing. Willpower, you get a little bit of it every day, but if your entire success is built on having that willpower, that's why I said don't have the desserts handy. Why? Because you don't have to use your willpower. If you don't have ice cream in the house, if you don't have a pint of Ben and Jerry's sitting right there, then you don't have to have willpower because it's solved for you. So what do you do with the willpower? The willpower is when you go to the grocery store. Don't put it in your cart, because the funniest thing is if you don't put it in your cart, it doesn't come to your house and you can't eat it. So the time to be disciplined is not after dinner when you're sitting on the couch and you're like, oh my gosh, I just need 2 or 3 bites of something, which we all know what happens when you have 2 bites. It's the time to be disciplined is, well, I'm going grocery shopping after work Monday. That's when you need to be like, if it goes in this cart, it goes in my body, and I'm making that deal with myself. If it goes in this cart, I have an agreement with myself that inside of this cart is a sacred place because it's what I will consume. It's what will fuel me this week. So what do I want to fuel me? Make that decision wisely.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. It's very interesting because when you're thinking of the I suppose just a position of motivations and discipline, one thing I love to say is don't spend your time on thinking you will acquire more motivations. Spend your time acquiring discipline so you don't need motivation and enjoy the process anyhow. Because the truth is, that's the same thing for everybody. If you look at any idols that you have, I promise you what they're known to be the best at, sometimes they don't want to do it. Sometimes I promise you, The Rock doesn't wake up at 4 saying, oh my God, I'm so glad to go to the gym for 3 hours. Just giving an example out of my head here. But that's something that's true around the whole spectrum. And because of that, I so adore what Lao Tzu has to say, which is a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single steps. And when you're thinking about yourself as a wellness advocate and think about the fact that people now live a very stressful life, they have full-time jobs, maybe even 2. What are some practical steps so they can begin their journey towards a more meaningful and perhaps a more healthy living?
Well, in this case, you're talking about like The Rock, and when you have motivation or don't have it, you're talking about 2 things. You're talking about intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. And it's not that they're necessarily versus, but they're both there. And so for example, The Rock, what I would bet happens, because when he doesn't feel motivated, say, 2 mornings a week or 1 morning a week, whatever, to get up at 4 a.m., he looks at his extrinsic motivation and says, I'm accountable to provide for these people. I have a team. I mean, The Rock has, I'm sure, a very large team of people that are all paid by him. He looks at, I have to make sure that these people are paid. So if I skip this workout, there's going to be a trickle effect to where they don't get paid. For another example, where that might be a little bit easier to access for most of your listeners, including me, when you need extrinsic motivation for a workout, like tomorrow is actually my hardest workout of the week. It's VO2 max workout. And I get to this very steep mountain, and then I basically do these repeats up and down the mountain. And I do that once a week or once every other week, but I know on that day it's all out. If my willpower is running a little low that week, I'll actually start calling people and saying, hey, I'm going Saturday at 8. Would you be willing to meet me at the bottom of the mountain to do repeats? Now, what I'm doing there is I'm outsourcing my willpower, because as soon as that person agrees, yeah, I'll meet you there, or yeah, I'll be at your house and we'll ride together, my willpower solved, because I don't want to disappoint that person. So I put things in place to say, now you don't have to rely on willpower because you already made the agreement. Another practical example of that is I love the feeling of having clean floors in the house. I have 2 kids, but I'm not married or anything like that. But I don't particularly like mopping the floors, but I love the feeling of having clean floors. So my problem is getting the mop and the cleaner out. My trick is I tell myself, I don't have to mop. I do not have to do that. But I'm just going to set this mop in the hallway with the thing and the steam cleaner or whatever, and just leave it there. And as soon as I put it out there, my brain will start to itch like by the minute. Like, you can't just leave that in the hallway. You already brought it out in the hallway. And then next thing I know, I find myself with a podcast on like yours, Sam, and I have the steam mopper on and I'm halfway through the house. And it's just a trick to say, you don't have to do it, but I'm just going to put this thing here. I make sourdough. I've got sourdough downstairs right now that I'm working on. And sourdough is a little bit of a pain to get started. I mean, you have to get your starter out. You have to feed it. There's a certain amount of flour and water. And then you go down there every hour or so and develop the gluten. When I think about the overall process of sourdough, I just think, why not just buy a damn piece of bread at the store or whatever. Even though every time sourdough comes out of the oven, there is nothing like biting into a fresh piece of sourdough. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling good. But my trick there is the same thing, Sam. I take the starter out of the fridge, I set it right there on my counter, and I set the flour next to it. I go, you don't have to make sourdough, but I'm just going to set this on the counter. And by the time I walk through the kitchen the 3rd time, I'll go, okay, I'm going to go ahead and feed the starter. I'm going to go ahead and get the flour going. And tomorrow it'll be ready to start mixing. So what I call that is synthesize the itch so you can create a scratch. And in this case, there isn't a real itch. I'm going to create the itch by putting these things in place. And what I'm doing there is saying the present me doesn't have the willpower or the strength to do it, but future me does. So what present me does is say, I'll put things in place so that the future you will handle this for me. And I'm delegating it to myself because I'll create the itch inside of my brain to say, I have to solve this. I have to solve this. I have to solve this. So it's one of those little hacks that I do whether it's running up the side of a mountain, making bread, or mopping the house. Synthesize the itch, and you will get a real scratch when you do that.
Beautiful. I love that. That's my first time hearing this quote, but I will definitely steal it, by the way.
Feel free. I was in my journal this morning, so you're welcome to take it.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. When you're thinking of, because to me, eating intelligently is an art. It's something that definitely takes very, 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 it's some delicacy, not only the way you do it, but how to be intentional behind it as well. There's a lot of meaning behind the simple fact of eating, which seems obviously it is a necessity, but eating well is definitely an art. When you're thinking about the kind of like the role of nutrition in personal developments and just how we say this quite often, but I think it's so important, but obviously a short mind and a short body. When you're thinking about just how much that enhances your mental clarity and your overall personal growth, would you say that it's something that any top performer ought to have on their mandatory lists to take proper care of the nutrition?
Yeah. It's funny you asked that because the answer is it depends, Sam, and I know the obvious answer that most people would have said was, of course, you have to have eating good for mental clarity. The caveat there is that mental clarity becomes more of a priority as you age, and it becomes harder to attain as you age. And I'll give you an example both. When you are in college, there are plenty of times where you can have 2 or 3 beers after dinner, still get up on 6 hours of sleep and be able to pump out, finals, whatever, exams, basketball practice, and go about your day. You talk to someone who is 50 years old and they'll tell you they didn't sleep well because they had a piece of pie after dinner and it ruined their sleep, which ruined the next day. So when you say mental clarity, yes, eating what you consume. And like you said, it's something that's necessary, but it is the perfect example, as the Stoics say, of temperance. Temperance being, we want to look for that perfect balance of what's in between these two things. With food, there's fewer better examples of temperance in that we have to have some, but do we have to have this much, right? There are classic examples of, today, there's never been a time in history, and I'll argue with anyone on this. There's never been a time in history where it's easier to overeat than it is today. If you go back 200 or 300 years, the idea of overeating because there were no processed foods was very difficult. Only like the best of kings had access to processed, and even then it was like steak and pie. And so you actually had to have a team in order to overeat back then. Now, all you have to do is go to Walmart and buy, boxes and boxes of these snack cakes, and you are on your way to diabetes and all the things that come with it. So with mental clarity, there is a point of diminishing return when you eat. And I'm going to go back to the bodybuilders and say, in a lot of ways, the bodybuilders solved this a long time ago. You generally don't see bodybuilders eating one huge meal, right? It's 5. The Rock is a perfect example. The Rock does not eat one large meal. And the reason is because he has got to have energy and clarity throughout the day. And he also has to maintain a ton of muscle mass. What's the way to do that? He does it in a way that his mental clarity is not impacted because he's not hungry and he's not full. He does not eat till he's full because he knows he has to eat again in 2 hours. And what you get from that is your brain, if you want to know scientifically what's happening, the blood is being pulled into your stomach to process the food. Your blood sugar's out of whack. That's what happens when you overeat. And by the way, starting tomorrow, families here in America start having Thanksgiving. So a lot of people will be overeating. I don't mean to toot my horn here. I don't struggle with overeating. And the reason is because just like with the back pain, the way that I feel when I have that extra 20% of calories is just, it's so miserable that I find myself going, that was not worth whatever. What I will do is eat a meal at Thanksgiving. I'll sample everything and I'll get to about 80% full. And where most people are like laying on the couch in a coma like an hour later, that's when I'll actually, like, just before I leave, I'll go back and get a second plate. And because my appetite is still going, I'm still a little bit hungry. And so I'll actually portion it. I'll probably eat the same amount of food they do, but I'll portion it out in a way where it doesn't cause my brain to fog and my stomach to feel like miserable. And this is, obviously there's a lot of health benefits here, but I'm just talking about in terms of clarity and satiety. The way is temperance. The Stoics had it right. Do it with temperance.
Yes. And the Stoics got a lot of things right. Let's be honest. The Stoic mentality, I think, is one that is crucial for modern people to understand. You touched on a very quite sensible, but I think quite necessary topic, which is the simplicity now of overeating and the simplicity of basically pretty much getting anything you want, anytime you want, in the comfort of your home. How much do you think that trigger actually is part of the overall problem of basically I have access to all these things. Therefore, isn't there some type of interesting, basically, dichotomy where you say, well, those things are accessible to me. Why not just using it? For example, in the cake example at the grocery stores, and perhaps tell me more about when you're thinking about the stress of craving something sugary. You go in the grocery stores, you see these beautiful Pop-Tarts right on your right, and you have actually to have the resilience and the discipline to say, you know what, I won't touch it. I'll actually go to the food counter, perhaps. How big of a deal do you think that is for most people to actually have that temperament, resilience in this modern world?
Well, we're in a modern look. morbid obesity has never been higher, and in America it's rampant. And morbid obesity is, the technical definition is basically what percentage of body fat you are. So I don't think there's any question that, in my mind, that access to these foods, and I think, quite frankly, most people are aware that it's just not a good idea. There's some sort of dissociation that occurs when they eat them, because after a while, they just get used to it and don't think about, oh, there's massive consequences for this by the time. And I think that's probably part of it. The consequences don't really come in mass until after 40. And then it's probably the same way with smoking, right? Where you can smoke and go, it's going to be a long time before these catch up with me, and I'll just quit before they eventually catch up with me. Yeah. Rationalization in its purest form, which I define rationalization as telling yourself a story. And so when you talk about access to these things, this is where the more intelligent you are, it can actually work against you in a lot of ways. And the reason is because I know a lot of people think, how would that be possible? It's because when you are intelligent, you can create really intricate, clever stories as to why this is a good exception. When you think about effective discipline and being able to access the right foods, it's something I call simple rules. And simple rules are stupid. They're very Occam's razor, meaning this is a very simple principle, but they're extremely effective. And I'll give you a classic example. No television in the house after 9 o'clock, right? If you look at where a lot of people struggle with exercise and things like that, it starts not in the morning, it starts the day prior, because they stayed up watching a show and then they were on Netflix and thought, I'll get in one more episode before I go to bed. Well, now it's 9:30 and I'm kind of hungry. I'm going to make some popcorn and watch one more episode. And then they go to bed. Their blood sugars are wrecked. They got 5 good hours of sleep. They were in bed for 6.5. And that all stems from not having a simple rule, which is no television after 9 o'clock. It's a dumb and simple rule, but it puts things in place. What are you going to do when the television's off after 9? Maybe read a book, start to do all the wind down stuff. You're not going to have a lot of stimulation for your brain, which means you're going to rest better, which means you're going to feel better tomorrow. So it's, as an adult, I feel like it's our responsibility to identify these simple rules, which means, for example, you might have this rule if you're trying to lose weight where you go, I'm not going to eat anything that's more than 20% of the calories come from sugar or something like that. If you have that rule and you're in the grocery store, it's a lot easier to decide, does this go in the cart or not? Because you have a rule of it meets this criteria or it does not. If you look at most any religion, they have a set of rules. I mean, you look at religions and it's a set of rules, and most of them are built around reciprocity, right? There's a reason for this. There's a reason these religions have been around for thousands of years, and it's because these are the rules for living a good life. And if you follow them, the odds of having a very good life are much higher than if you break them. I'm sure there's going to be people who go, oh, what about this? What about this rule? But for the most part, those simple rules, the 10 Commandments is a great example. Turns out if you follow the 10 Commandments, you've got about 80% of the thing you need to live a fulfilling life. So So when I think of simple rules, what we're doing is we're removing rationalization, the ability to we're taking rationalization out of the equation and saying, I already made a rule in place. I can't. Now, what you can do is say, I can change the rules, but I can never change the rules on the spot. That's a different, because you'll be in the grocery store and you'll go, well, my kids are having a birthday party, so I'm just going to go ahead and get them something and something for me. And, oh, this is on sale today, and I do want to save money. That's the big one, because processed foods are always going on sale. So when you're in the moment, it's very easy to rationalize. But when you say, I can't break the rules until they were broken before, like when I make the rules, they have to be in place on a Sunday. I think the way that spenders do this is they put their credit card in a glass of water in the freezer, so that if they want to go out and spend, they have to take that cup out of the freezer, thaw it, and then get their credit card out and then go. But what happens by the time they do that, the urge to go buy that sweater or shirt has passed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
I never heard of this.
Yeah. Well, that's for people who aren't able to control their spending. And that, heads up, I mean, there's a lot of people in America who really struggle with staying, living beneath their means, as that they would say, living beneath their means.
Absolutely. One thing you mentioned that I want to rebound on is basically you said, well, perhaps if you don't have television after 9, you might want to read a book, which, by the way, fantastic insights. Anyone watching it, you definitely should. More books, typically, the better you will be. And I know you're an avid reader, and I see a few behind you. I know that you read somewhat around over 1,000 books, basically, in your lifetime. Do you think that reading can be a great source of education for wellness compared to maybe any other version or any other format that we have now these days?
I'm not going to give you quite the answer you expect on this, and it's because after reading all the books I have, and I'm an avid learner, I've learned something, and it's actually been kind of a sour lesson for me, and that is self-development. Whether you're reading books like, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or Charles Duhigg, or James Clear, and all these wonderful self-development books. And when it comes to reading, your question was, does reading make it easier for wellness? So let's say you're listening to Andrew Huberman and you're listening to The Best Workout Protocol. That is at most half the ingredient for success, at most. And I will say the reason is, I know just as many people who listen to self-development books and it has become their hobby, but actually putting in the reps has not become their hobby at all. They will actually listen to self-help and go, I'm listening to self-help so I can feel good about myself. But if you actually ask them, are you doing what James Clear told you? They'll be like, well, I'm going to start sometime. Well, the same goes with wellness. I think most people who make the most money in wellness, they're selling it to people that they know are not going to either use it, or they're going to use it very briefly and then move on to the next fad. There's a saying in authors that they go, if you include the word diet in your book cover, you will sell like the book companies will say you will sell like 20% more if you just include the word diet in your book cover. So I do believe that education with books, and this is one of the things where the internet is going back to temperance. Yes, you can get on TikTok and watch God knows how many hours of useless information that's just basically keeping you from your higher purpose in life. But there is also, when it comes to social media, there are also really good tidbits of information of, hey, if you're trying a new workout, like I'm constantly, with the people I follow, I'm constantly learning from them and going, mercy, I've been lifting weights for 20 years and I never thought about doing it that particular way. Or talking about a recipe for the morning, where you can hit your macro, and I'll go, man, that's a clever little twist to add flavor to your. There are really good things out there in terms of having access to your smartphone. The caveat, of course, is just like with anything with this temperance, it's also a way to find yourself going, where did the last hour go? I've been scrolling through videos. I have no idea what I just did for the last hour. That's an hour you never get back. So when you ask me, are books a good thing? I absolutely agree they are. But now whenever I pick up a book, I go, what are you going to do to bring this into your life? Or at my age, by the way, I've read so many books that generally when I'm 10% in the way of the book, I can pretty much figure out, is this going to go teach me anything, or are they just regurgitating lessons I happen to already know? And by the way, sometimes when they most of these lessons are regurgitated, but if they can do it in such a clever fashion to make it more modern and feasible, in a lot of ways, that's where I go, okay, they're being clever with this. They're making it in a new way. This is neat. But more importantly than any of that, Sam, is what are you going to do with this information? Because it makes us feel good to go, oh, I just finished another book on Audible. Check. People can see on Goodreads that I just read, ways to be a better friend or how to win friends and influence people. Great. But what are you going to actually do tomorrow or today that's going to cause you to have integrated what you learned from that book?
Beautiful. Yes. Actions, at the end of the day, the best way to pick in any concept, any journey is just to start.
Put in the reps, man. Put in the
exactly.
reps.
Putting the reps. We're touching on a recurring theme here, Daniel, which I'd like to dive deeper into the meaningfulness of that, which is simplicity, right? Just as scrolling on TikTok is simple, access to the gym and the best nutrition, basically food is also as simple as ever. So truly, simplicity is a double-edged sword, and I love. I don't know the author of this one, but it's a concept in which if you choose to basically putting the works in the actions you have, you basically you make some hard actions, you'll have some easy consequences. And if you always take the easy path, you'll have hard consequences. So just choose your heart, perhaps, is the best way to look at it. But when you're thinking about innovation during crisis and this process of turning adversity, which in case simplicity can be an adversity, but can also be an opportunities. How can people perhaps, either rationalize or simply put, discipline themselves to have a process in which the simplicity of this world, which is something that we want to honor. We live now a life in which we live longer, we live much, much, much more easier when it comes to the physical world. We have all sorts of mental battle, which we can get into, but the physical world now compared to any other centuries, I mean, it's not even close about how perhaps easy of a living we most people, obviously, in America and developed countries are able to accomplish. How does that resonate? And perhaps do you have any practical tips that you took from your life to this far, and maybe books and corporate life and so on, to say, well, Sam, I embrace simplicity this way so I can make the most of it and actually become the best version of myself through it?
So is the question, what am I embracing in terms of simplicity? Like what habits do I do? Or what are you looking for exactly here, Sam?
When you're thinking about simplicity as a double-edged sword, what are your best practical tips so basically people can actually use simplicity as a meaningful way to become better?
Yeah. Okay, I think I follow now. What we're talking about is how do you leverage simplicity as a tool? And the way that I would do that is never start with the rule. Start with the person who you want to be. And you start thinking, well, I want to be 10 pounds lighter. I want to be able to run 5 miles. I want to have, X number of dollars in the bank. You do not start with simple rules because that's fleeting. Oh, the classic example is you're scrolling through Instagram and they're like, here's 10 things that I do every day. And you copy and paste that into your habit. That is not a good idea because those may or may not align with your character. They may be further along on their journey than you are, which is usually the case. And they may be even exaggerating their daily rituals in order to kind of maybe hopefully inspire you to follow them. So the way that I would do this, I'm going to throw you, I know with these questions, Sam, I've not given you the simple answer or the straightforward answer. It might be a simple answer, but the best way to start with simplicity and simple rules is to journal. And the problem with journaling is it's so simple that people go, well, why do I need to journal? I have a smartphone right here that, I can't even tell you how many times I've talked to people who are like actually asking me questions like, how can I outsource the journaling to AI? And I'm going, this is the problem. And I love AI, but it's like there is no substitute for you doing the work on yourself. There are more effective ways to do work on yourself. There are effective questions you can ask yourself, but you have to do the work. I mean, I think one of the oldest phrases of all time is, it was on the Oracle in Rome, and it was know thyself. And journaling, that's what you're doing. You're going, who am I? What am I learning? Now, how does this tie in to having simple rules and using simplicity? It actually is very simple, which is this. When you notice in your journal that there are behaviors and actions that are in conflict with the person you want to become, that is the time that you go, this is a reoccurring theme. I know this is a reoccurring theme because I've been journaling now for several months, and I have seen that I've done this 3 times in a row. And I'll make up an example. Sam notices that he blows his diet or stays out late or whatever. And what's the common denominator? This group of friends that he hangs out with. And he goes, oh my gosh, I realize that every time I hang out with that group of friends, they are not good for the goals that I'm trying to become. What's the simple rule there? You're going to have to start limiting the company you hang out with or how frequently you hang out with them. And that's just an example of, you start by identifying the person you want to become. And the way to identify that, in my opinion, is asking yourself hard questions when you journal. Am I growing in the right direction? When I look back on the week that I just went through, how did I grow from this? It doesn't mean that the week was better than the last. And in fact, I would argue if every week is sort of pleasurable, it probably means you're not growing, because pleasure usually involves some sort of friction, discomfort, and things that you're sort of facing. That is the beauty of growth, and there's nothing quite like it. So when I think of how do I come up with simple rules to live by, you start by journaling and saying, who's the person I'm becoming? And then you basically take the two trees there. You have simple rules that help you to encourage you to become the person you want to be. So I gave you one early in this interview, which was I have a VO2 max workout. And sometimes my willpower is a little low, so I schedule that. But then there's the ones that you put simple rules that are pulling you down. And that might be something like, I have to turn off the TV by 9 o'clock, no exceptions. Well, what's the first thing an irrational person is going to do? The first thing a rational person is going to do is go, well, I turned off the TV, but didn't say anything about the phone. I need to check my work emails one more time. You get in your work email, and the next thing you know, without even thinking about it, you've opened LinkedIn, which led you to social media, which led you to YouTube, and 2 hours later, you're like, I'm still watching YouTube because I checked my work email. These are where simple rules. You will journal and say, I didn't get much sleep last night. Why didn't I get much sleep last night? Well, because I did this, because I did. You go back down the trail, and the simple rule there, put your phone in airplane mode at this time, or do not disturb, whatever. And that solves the problem for you. Is it a dumb, simple rule? Absolutely. But dumb, simple rules is what we need in order to save our willpower for the things we need them the most.
Yes, absolutely. And I love this answer. I love this answer because you mentioned something that I think could be such a great topic to explore. In your vision of where this world is going for all the good and bad, and you're thinking about the future of wellness and empowering others to innovation, but truly centralizing on your tagline, which I absolutely adore, which is making healthy living accessible. What's your vision for what basically the future of healthcare is? And perhaps how does that intertwine with your plan to continue inspiring others to live healthier, more meaningful lives?
The future of what healthcare is? Wow, that's a great one. I would say what I'm leaning towards is that people become more aware of the decisions they make today and how they're going to play out in the future. So being able, let's say we talk about AI. What if you put in your daily habits into AI and your blood work, and it basically told you, and they can pretty darn sure come close to this at this point. They can tell you, Sam, based on the trajectory you're going, this is how your 40s are going to look like. These are your 50s and these are your 60s. Now, let me tell you where most people I know when I was in corporate, let me tell you the big illusion. And this is where I wish healthcare were going this way. I don't know if it is, but if you ask me the question, so I'm going to dream here. The big mistake that is by far made in corporate environments, but certainly in a lot of other ones, is I will take care of myself and enjoy my life after I retire. That is absolute BS. It is you basically wake up one day. Finally, you got to this point where you are retired. You're 70 years old. You have not taken great care of yourself, but you're starting to do walks regularly. Congratulations. You can't travel to the places you wanted to go to now because within an hour your feet are starting to hurt. You're on medications now. Ever since you've had your heart attack, you're not supposed to be more than X number of minutes away from a hospital. And these are things where we have taken the present for granted, and we've taken the future for granted, and we've abused the present. And in this particular case, where I think healthcare should go is we should become much more aware that the decisions we make today, how they're going to play out in the future in terms of the quality of life we should expect. So if I told you, Sam, if your health and your blood work and your fitness are at this level, this is what you can expect your life to be like at 65. It becomes a little bit easier to go, well, I mean, mercy, I'm saving for, retirement. Why would I not invest in being able to enjoy that retirement and being able to be fit, think clearly, and all those things? When I focus on health, Sam, I know a lot of people focus on this metric of how do I live longer? How do I live longer? That's not my priority. There's plenty of people arguing that. My priority is how do I help you enjoy the years more? Because with modern technology, they can pretty much put you in a wheelchair with the right meds in a nursing home, and you can sit there and stretch out the last 20 years of your life. And congratulations, your family will visit you on Thanksgiving and Christmas and say hi. But, your quality of life is pretty much relegated to, a couple of friends who watch TV with you and something like that. To me, that's like the ultimate disrespect of what God gave us to enjoy about our life. We're here to basically make a dent in the world. We're here to take care of ourselves. And the only way to do that, to put our best selves out, the only way to do that is to take care of ourselves. Because if you want an example of this, it's so hard to experience joy if you're not well rested. Forget having the flu. If you just haven't had good sleep in 2 or 3 nights, it's so hard to be happy because all you're thinking about the entire day is, I just need rest. Well, that's sort of an example of what I'm trying to do with people's lives, is get them to a point where they can have the vast majority of their days can be where they're aware, their brain is working clearly. They have the energy to do the things they want to do. I mean, that's the podcast name that I host, is Chasing Energy. I want to give people the resources to harness that energy and to utilize it for what they feel called to do in life.
Incredible. Tomorrow is not promised, so let's make the most out of today. Perhaps is your perspective. Daniel, Lucas, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Meaningful Podcast.
I'm truly grateful to have connected with you, man.
Thank you. Well, and I'm truly grateful to connect with you as well. And I think our vision and missions of making this world more meaningful is truly embedded, and with different strength. But I think that's what the beautiful things about human beings is. And you have a few decades on me, so I'll catch you with the amount of books you read. But for now, I probably read 55, 60 now, and basically since I'm 13 years old, and I am a true believer of just being a lifelong learner, which you definitely are such thing. Would you have any last thoughts for our audience, please?
Last thoughts. That's a great question. I had like 5 different thoughts while you were saying that, Sam. How old did you say you were?
I'm 20 years old.
20. Okay, so you've been reading books for 13, you said?
So no, since I'm 13. So I was yes,
that's
I started
impressive, man.
I started with Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill when I was 13 years old.
Yeah, I do have a last thought here. And with this being the meaning podcast, one of my favorite books of all time, I don't know if I have a favorite, is Man's Search for Meaning. And that's Viktor Frankl. And there's a couple of phrases I want to share with people. The space between stimulus and response gives you a choice. And in that space, that choice will determine your legacy in life. I live my life very much after I read that book, I don't know how many years ago. I look every time I come into a situation where my gut or my anger or whatever starts to pop up, or my instinct, and I look at that space with its precious, precious real estate, and I say, this is your chance. You can determine how you're going to react to this. The other part of that is that when we talk about, you're listening to this podcast because you are in search of meaning, or you're someone who values meaning. And to that, I would say the other thing that Viktor Frankl taught me was life is not about comfort, which is why he overturned Freud's theories at the time, which is that man was in search of pleasure. Viktor Frankl's argument was that Freud was wrong. He was very outspoken about this. He said, man is not in search of pleasure. Man is in search of purpose. And when we think about purpose, it never comes easy. I think anytime someone identifies their purpose in life, it's not just keep doing what you are already doing and do the status quo. I have a hard time believing that that is what someone's purpose in life is. So what I want people to take away from this is, are you asking yourself the hard questions and doing the work to go, okay, I need to identify my purpose? I think when I went on my tangent about the pros and cons of reading all the books earlier, I think for some reason I thought, after I read this next book, then I'll find my purpose. So I'm all about reading books. I highly promote it. But I would encourage people, when you look for meaning, look for, it's going to almost involve friction. And our gut reaction is, oh, that's going to be hard, or I'm not comfortable with that. Use that as a compass and say, this thing that I feel repelled, I literally have added a line to my daily journal, and it's a prompt, it's a question, and it says this: what are you most avoiding right now? And it is one of those things where I used to say it out loud when I was walking through the house, and I would be like doing chores and stuff, and I go, there's something you're avoiding right now, and you're doing these chores as a way of not doing that thing. So now in my journal, I have that prompt to say, what are you running from? What is it that you're avoiding that would probably help you grow?
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.